The smoke rising from what remained of her barn turned the New Mexico sky black, and Lily Norton could only stand there with ash in her hair and devastation in her heart, wondering how she would survive another day. She had built this farm from nothing after her parents died 3 years ago, working the unforgiving earth of Fort Sumner until her hands bled and her back screamed. But the Union soldiers who rode through yesterday had torn it all down in minutes. They claimed they were searching for Confederate sympathizers hiding supplies, but Lily knew the truth. Captain Morrison had propositioned her in town 2 weeks back, and when she refused him in front of his men, he had promised she would regret it. Now, in the autumn of 1866, with the war barely over and lawlessness still gripping the territory, she stood amid the wreckage of everything she had worked for. The well had been poisoned with dead chickens. The fences were scattered across the prairie like broken bones. Her small herd of cattle had been driven off, probably sold to some rancher 2 towns over by now. The house still stood, but every window was shattered, and they had taken or destroyed most of her food stores. Winter would come soon to this high desert country, and without shelter for animals, without crops, without anything, she would have to abandon the land her father had died protecting during a Comanche raid 5 years ago. Lily was 22 years old, and she had never felt so alone. She was trying to salvage what she could from the ruined barn when she heard the horse approaching. Her father's old rifle was in the house, but she would never reach it in time, so she grabbed a pitchfork and turned to face whoever was coming. The rider was tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the afternoon sun, and as he drew closer, she could see he was leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. He stopped at the edge of her property, looking at the destruction with an expression she could not quite read. "Soldiers?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. "What business is it of yours?" Lily kept the pitchfork raised, though her arms were already shaking from exhaustion. The man dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of good whiskey. His clothes were dusty from travel, but she noticed his gun belt was well maintained, the leather oiled and the revolver sitting easy in its holster. "Name's Thomas Jamison. I worked for the Harris Ranch up north until they sold out last month. Been riding south looking for work." He nodded toward the destruction. "Looks like you could use a hand. I cannot pay you. Did not ask for pay." He surveyed the damage more carefully. "I have some supplies and I know how to build. You have land and water, even if the well needs cleaning. Seems like we could help each other out." Lily wanted to tell him to leave. She wanted to say she did not need charity, especially not from some drifting cowboy who probably had his own problems he was running from. But the words died in her throat as she looked again at the ruins of her barn, at the approaching winter, at the impossible task of rebuilding alone. "Why would you help me?" she asked instead. Thomas was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "My sister had a farm in Kansas. Raiders came through in '63, did something like this. She did not make it." He met Lily's eyes then, and she saw old pain there, the kind that never quite healed. "Figured if I could not help her, maybe I could help someone else." She lowered the pitchfork slowly. "The soldiers might come back. Then I will be here when they do." Something in the way he said it, with quiet certainty rather than bravado, made Lily believe him. She nodded once, sharp and quick before she could change her mind. "The well needs to be cleaned first. We will need water for everything else." Thomas tied his horse and mule to the one fence post still standing and removed his hat, revealing hair pressed flat with sweat. "Show me where you keep your buckets." They worked until dark hauling out the fouled water and the dead chickens the soldiers had thrown in. Thomas descended into the well itself, standing chest deep in the remaining water to scrub the stones clean while Lily hauled up bucket after bucket of waste. By the time they finished, both were filthy and exhausted. Lily had some cornmeal the soldiers had missed in a hidden cellar, and she made johnnycakes over a small fire while Thomas set up a bedroll in what remained of the barn. "You can sleep in the house," she said, bringing him food. "There is a room downstairs. House is yours, I will be fine out here." He accepted the plate with a nod of thanks. "Besides, if anyone comes, I will hear them better from here." Lily wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She left him there in the darkness and went inside, barring the broken door as best she could. She lay awake for hours, listening to the wind through the shattered windows, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake letting a stranger stay. But when she finally slept, it was deeper than she had managed since the soldiers came. Morning came cold and bright. Lily woke to the sound of hammering and found Thomas already at work on the barn, pulling down the damaged sections to see what could be saved. He had made coffee over a small fire, strong and bitter, and she accepted a cup gratefully. "We need lumber," he said, not wasting time on pleasantries. "Some of these beams can be reused, but we need fresh wood for the frame. There is a sawmill about 15 miles east past the Pecos River. If you have anything to trade, we might get enough to start." Lily thought of her mother's silver brush and mirror, the only valuable things she had left. "I have something." They saddled Thomas's horse and the mule and rode out together, leaving the farm behind with an uneasy feeling in Lily's stomach. The land here was beautiful in its harshness, all red earth and scattered juniper, with the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rising purple in the far distance. The sky was so blue it hurt to look at, and the air smelled of dust and sage. Thomas rode easily beside her, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. "How long have you been alone here?" he asked. 3 years. "My parents came out in 58 before the war. My father died in 61 during a raid. My mother lasted another year, but the consumption took her." Lily kept her voice steady, though talking about it still ached. "I had 2 older brothers, but they both went east to fight. Matthew died at Glorieta Pass. James never came back from Virginia. I am all that is left. I am sorry. Everyone lost someone in the war." She glanced at him. "You fight?" "Confederate cavalry, though I am not proud of it. Joined up when I was 17 and stupid, thought it was about states' rights like they told us. Took me 2 years to figure out what I was really fighting for, and by then I had seen things I wish I could forget." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Deserted in 64. Spent the last year of the war hiding out in the territories, helping my sister with her farm. After she died, I just kept moving." Lily understood that impulse, the need to run from pain, but running never worked. The pain always followed. "Fort Sumner is full of men running from something," she said. "You will fit right in." The sawmill was run by a German immigrant named Hans, who drove a hard bargain. Lily's mother's silver got them enough rough lumber for the barn frame and some pine boards for patching the house, but not much more. Hans threw in a keg of nails when he saw the determination in Lily's face, though, and told them to come back when they had more to trade. They hauled the lumber back in 2 trips over 2 days. Thomas worked from dawn to dusk, his shirt off in the heat as he measured and cut and hammered. Lily worked beside him, holding beams in place and learning to swing a hammer without hitting her thumb. Her hands, already calloused from farm work, developed new blisters that burst and bled and hardened again. By the end of the first week, they had the frame of the barn rising against the sky. Thomas did not talk much while he worked, but Lily found she did not mind the silence. There was something comforting about the rhythm of shared labor, the understanding that passed between them with just a glance or a gesture. When they did talk, It was about practical things. The angle of the roof, the placement of the stalls, whether they could afford to build a loft for hay storage. But sometimes, in the evenings over their simple meals, the conversation drifted to other things. Thomas told her about growing up in Texas, about his sister who had been like a mother to him after their own mother died in childbirth. Lily found herself sharing memories of her brothers, stories she had locked away because there had been no one to tell them to. They discovered they both loved the early mornings best, when the world was quiet and full of possibility. They both hated beans but ate them anyway, because they were cheap and filling. They both had a stubborn streak that made them push forward even when the sensible thing would be to quit. 2 weeks after Thomas arrived, Captain Morrison returned. Lily was in the house when she heard horses approaching. She grabbed her father's rifle and ran outside to find Thomas already standing in the yard, his hand resting on his gun. 6 soldiers rode up, Morrison in the lead on a bay gelding that was too fine for army issue. He had probably stolen it from someone. "Well now," Morrison said, his voice dripping false pleasantries. "Looks like you found yourself a pet, Miss Norton. Hope you are paying him well." "State your business and leave," Lily said, keeping the rifle pointed at the ground but ready to lift it. Morrison's eyes hardened. "My business is making sure there are no Confederate fugitives hiding out here. I have reports that you are harboring a deserter." "I am harboring a hired hand who is helping me rebuild what you destroyed." Lily stepped forward, anger burning through her fear. "You had no right to do what you did, and you have no right to come back here now. I have every right. I am an officer of the United States Army, and this territory is still under military jurisdiction." Morrison dismounted, his men following suit. "I am going to search your property again, and this time I might not be so gentle." "No," Thomas said quietly. "You are not." Morrison turned to him with a sneer. "You going to stop me, cowboy? You and what army? Just me." Thomas took a step forward, his stance relaxed but ready. "But before you do anything stupid, you should know I rode with Quantrill for a while back in '62. Left because I could not stomach the killing, but I learned a few things before I went. I am faster than anyone you have got, and I will put 3 of you down before you clear leather. Maybe I die after that, but you will definitely be one of the 3. So you ask yourself, Captain, is harassing one woman on a hardscrabble farm worth dying over?" The silence stretched out, broken only by the wind and the nervous stamping of horses. Lily could see Morrison calculating, weighing his pride against his survival instinct. She had heard of Quantrill's raiders. Everyone had. They were the most vicious guerrilla fighters of the war, men who killed without mercy and disappeared like ghosts. If Thomas had ridden with them, even briefly, he was far more dangerous than he looked. "This is not over," Morrison finally said, mounting his horse again. "I will be back with more men." "Looking forward to it," Thomas replied, his voice still that same dangerous quiet. The soldiers rode away, but Lily knew it was not an empty threat. Morrison was the type of man who could not let an insult stand, especially in front of his troops. They would come back, and when they did, it would be worse. "You should not have done that," Lily said when the dust settled. "You just made yourself a target." "I was already a target." "Deserters do not get trials, they get ropes." Thomas turned to look at her, and for the first time she saw real fear in his eyes. "But I meant what I said. I will not let them hurt you." Something shifted in that moment, some understanding passing between them that went deeper than words. Lily realized she trusted this man, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere with his quiet strength and his old pain. More than that, she was beginning to feel something else, something that warmed her from the inside even as it terrified her. "We should finish the barn quickly," she said, looking away before he could see too much in her face. We will need the shelter when they come back." They worked even harder after that, racing against time and the threat of Morrison's return. Thomas rode into Fort Sumner and came back with information. Morrison was recruiting locals, offering bounties to anyone who would ride against them. Some men had refused, recognizing it for the personal vendetta it was, but others were always willing to make a few dollars through violence. They might have a week, maybe two, before Morrison gathered enough men to feel confident attacking. In the evenings, Thomas began teaching Lily to shoot properly. Her father had taught her the basics, but Thomas refined her stance, her breathing, her trigger pull. "Do not aim where they are," he told her, his hands adjusting her grip on the rifle. "Aim where they will be. Account for distance and wind and the speed they are moving." His touch was gentle and professional, but Lily felt every point of contact like a brand. She tried to focus on the target he had set up, an old board propped against rocks 50 yards out, but she was intensely aware of him standing close behind her, his breath warm against her ear as he gave instructions. "Now," he said softly. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked and the board splintered dead center. Thomas stepped back with an approving nod. "You are a natural. Do that when they come and we might actually survive this." "And if we do not?" Lily turned to face him, suddenly needing to know. "What happens if Morrison comes with 20 men instead of 6? Thomas looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. "Then we fight anyway. Sometimes survival is not about winning. It is about standing your ground and making the other side pay so dearly for every inch that they decide it is not worth it." He paused. "But if it comes to that, if I tell you to run, you run. You understand me. You take my horse and you ride for Roswell or Santa Fe and you do not look back." "I will not leave you, Lily." "No." She set the rifle down and moved closer, her heart pounding. "I will not run again. I have been running my whole life. Running from the memory of my parents, running from the grief of my brothers, running from anything that might hurt me. I am tired of running, Thomas. If Morrison comes, we face him together, or we do not face him at all." He stared at her, and she saw the moment he stopped seeing her as someone to protect and started seeing her as an equal, a partner. His hand came up slowly to cup her cheek, rough and calloused and impossibly gentle. "You are the stubbornest woman I have ever met, and you are the most frustrating man." But she was smiling, and so was he, and then somehow the distance between them disappeared and he was kissing her. It was nothing like the rough, demanding kisses she had endured from boys in town who thought she owed them something. This was tender and searching, a question more than a demand. Lily kissed him back with everything she had been holding inside, all the fear and hope and desperate need for connection she had been denying herself for so long. Thomas's arms came around her, strong and sure, and for the first time in years, Lily felt safe. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things." Everything was already complicated. Lily laughed shakily. "At least now we have a reason to make sure we survive." They went back to work the next morning, but everything had changed. The glances they exchanged were warmer now, weighted with meaning. Thomas found excuses to brush past her, and Lily discovered reasons to need his help with tasks she could have managed alone. They stole kisses in the barn when the work grew too intense, brief moments of sweetness in the midst of the urgency. The barn took shape quickly now, its frame solid and its walls rising. They built stalls for the cattle Lily hoped to buy back eventually, and a tack room for supplies. Thomas insisted on making the structure defensible too, cutting rifle slits in the walls where they could shoot from cover if necessary, and reinforcing the doors with iron brackets salvaged from the old wreckage. 3 weeks after Morrison's visit, they were finishing the barn roof when a rider approached from town. Lily recognized him as Samuel Chen, a Chinese immigrant who ran the general store. He was a good man who had always treated her fairly, and he looked frightened now. "Miss Norton," he called, pulling his horse up short. "I came to warn you. Morrison is coming tomorrow at dawn with 15 men. He has been drinking and talking about making examples. You should leave, both of you, right now." Thomas climbed down from the roof, his face grim. "How many of those 15 are actual soldiers? Maybe 5. The rest are just men looking for trouble and money." Samuel looked between them. "This is not worth dying over. Just go." "Thank you for the warning, Samuel," Lily said, "but we are staying." "That is foolish. Probably." She managed a smile. "But this is my land, and I am done letting people take things from me." Samuel shook his head sadly but did not argue further. He rode away, leaving them with less than 24 hours to prepare. They worked through the night by lantern light. Thomas reinforced the windows of the house with furniture, creating shooting positions that offered protection while allowing them clear fields of fire. They loaded every gun they had, including an old shotgun Thomas had been carrying on his mule, and 2 pistols he produced from his saddlebags. They filled barrels with water and stocked ammunition in easy reach. As the sky began to lighten in the east, Lily found Thomas standing in the yard, staring at the barn they had built together. She came to stand beside him, and he took her hand without looking away from the structure. "It is a good barn," he said quietly. "Solid. It will last a long time. We will finish the roof when this is over." Lily squeezed his hand. "And then we will build a proper fence and get the cattle back and plant winter wheat in the south field." "And maybe we will get married," Thomas added, still looking at the barn. "If you would have me. I know I do not have much to offer, but I love you, Lily Norton. I think I have loved you since the moment you stood there with that pitchfork, all fierce and determined and refusing to be broken." Lily felt tears sting her eyes, but they were good tears, the kind that came from joy rather than sorrow. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it, but first we survive today." "First we survive today," Thomas agreed. They took positions in the house as the sun climbed higher, Thomas at the front window and Lily at the side. The waiting was the worst part, the slow crawl of minutes that felt like hours. Lily tried to keep her breathing steady, her hands firm on the rifle. She thought about her parents, about her brothers, about all the people she had loved and lost. She would not lose Thomas too. Not today. Not ever if she had any say in it. The riders appeared just after sunrise, a line of horses and men silhouetted against the pink sky. Morrison rode at the front, and even from a distance Lily could see he was ready for violence. They stopped at the property line, and Morrison's voice carried across the yard. "Thomas Jamison, you are wanted for desertion from the Confederate Army. Come out and surrender and the woman will not be harmed." "I've got a better idea," Thomas called back. "You turn around and ride away and nobody has to die today," Morrison laughed, the sound ugly and mean. "You are outnumbered. You cannot win. Last chance, Cowboy. Come out or we burn you out." Thomas looked at Lily and she nodded once. He turned back to the window and raised his rifle. "Then I guess we are doing this the hard way." His first shot took Morrison's hat clean off. The second shot dropped one of the horses, sending its rider tumbling. All hell broke loose. The men charged forward, firing as they came. Thomas worked the lever of his rifle with mechanical precision, each shot deliberate and aimed. Lily fired too, focusing on the targets Thomas had taught her to see, leading her shots and breathing through the recoil. 2 men went down in the first exchange, one clutching his shoulder and the other not moving. The remaining riders scattered, taking cover behind the ruined fence and in the scattered debris still littering the property. The fight settled into a siege, shots cracking back and forth, bullets thudding into the walls of the house and whining past the windows. Thomas moved from position to position, never staying still long enough for them to get a bead on him. Lily held her spot, protecting the flank, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the gunfire. An hour passed, then two. The sun climbed higher, turning the house into an oven. Lily's arms ached from holding the rifle and her ears rang from the constant noise. 3 more of Morrison's men went down, one dragging himself away with a shattered leg, the others lying still in the dirt. The rest were getting cautious now, realizing this was not the easy raid they had been promised. Then Thomas grunted and stumbled back from the window. Lily saw blood on his shoulder and felt her world narrow to a single point of terrible clarity. She was at his side in an instant, pulling him away from the line of fire. "I am fine," he said through gritted teeth. "Just grazed me. Get back to your position. Like hell." Lily grabbed a cloth and pressed it against the wound, which was deeper than a graze but not life-threatening if they could stop the bleeding. She tied it tight, her hands steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. "Can you shoot?" "Yes." Thomas picked up his rifle again, his face pale but determined. "But we are running low on ammunition. We cannot hold out much longer." As if to punctuate his words, someone shouted from outside, "The barn, fire the barn!" Lily looked out the window and felt her heart sink. 2 men were running toward the barn with torches, using the chaos of the gunfight as cover. If they reached it, everything they had built would burn, and with it their hope of surviving the winter. "I am going out there," she said, already moving toward the back door. Lily. No, but she was already gone, sprinting across the open ground with her rifle in her hands and rage giving her speed. She heard Thomas shouting behind her, heard the crack of his rifle as he tried to provide cover. One of the men with torches saw her coming and raised his gun, but she was faster. Her shot took him in the chest, and he went down hard. The second man threw his torch. It arced through the air, trailing smoke and sparks, heading straight for the open barn door and the dry straw inside. Lily did not think. She dove, catching the torch mid-flight and landing hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. The torch went flying in the opposite direction, landing in bare dirt and guttering out. Then there was a gun pressed against her head and Morrison's voice in her ear. "Got you." Time seemed to slow. Lily could see Thomas in the doorway of the house, his face twisted in horror and fury. She could see Morrison's men closing in, sensing victory. She could see the end of everything stretching out before her, and it was not fair, not after everything they had survived. "Let her go, Morrison." Thomas stepped fully into the yard, his hands raised, his gun dangling from one finger by the trigger guard. "You want to desert her? Here I am. Take me and leave her alone." "No." Lily tried to struggle, but Morrison's grip was iron. "Why would I do that?" Morrison said, "when I can have both of you? You will hang and she will watch, and then we will see how defiant she is when she is all alone again." "You always were stupid," Thomas said conversationally. "All that time in command and you never learned the first rule of combat." "What rule is that?" "Always check your perimeter." The shot came from behind Morrison, from the direction of town. His grip on Lily went slack, and he toppled sideways with a hole in his back. Lily rolled away as more shots rang out, and Morrison's men started dropping. She looked up to see a dozen riders pouring into the yard, led by Samuel Chen with a rifle and backed by other townspeople, shopkeepers and farmers and even old hands from the sawmill. The fight went out of Morrison's men instantly. Those who could mounted up and rode, leaving their dead and wounded behind. The ones too hurt to ride threw down their weapons and raised their hands. It was over in less than a minute. Samuel dismounted and helped Lily to her feet. "We decided we were tired of Morrison," he said simply. "He has been abusing his authority since the war ended, taking what he wants and hurting people who cannot fight back. When we heard he was coming after you, we figured it was time to make a stand." Thomas stumbled over, his shoulder still bleeding but his eyes bright with relief and love. "You are insane," he told Lily, pulling her into his arms despite the audience. "You could have been killed, so could you, offering to surrender like that?" She held him tight, not caring about the blood or the watching crowd. "We are both insane, I think." "Probably," he agreed and kissed her hard. The aftermath took hours to sort out. The townspeople hauled the wounded to the doctor in Fort Sumner and buried the dead, including Morrison, in unmarked graves. They wrote statements about Morrison's abuse of power and sent them to the territorial governor and to the Army command in Santa Fe. No one mourned Morrison. His own men testified that he had been acting outside orders, pursuing a personal vendetta, and by the time the official investigation concluded 3 weeks later, Thomas's desertion had been quietly pardoned as part of the general amnesty following the war. Through it all, Lily and Thomas worked to finish the barn. Their neighbors came to help, bringing lumber and nails and labor. Within a month, the barn was complete, the fences were repaired, and Lily's small herd had been quietly returned by men who had bought the stolen cattle and now felt guilty about it. The farm began to live again. They were married in November by a traveling preacher, with half the town in attendance. Lily wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, and Thomas wore a new suit bought with money from selling his first cattle. They spoke their vows in front of the barn they had built together, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up could probably be heard all the way to Santa Fe. The winter of 1866 was harsh, with storms that howled down from the mountains and buried the prairie in snow. But the barn stood firm, sheltering their animals, and the house stayed warm with Thomas beside her. They spent the long evenings planning for spring, talking about crops and herds and the future they would build together. In February, Lily discovered she was pregnant. Thomas was so overjoyed he picked her up and spun her around until she was dizzy and laughing. They argued about names, him insisting on something traditional while she wanted something unusual. They compromised on Samuel if it was a boy, after the man who had saved their lives, and Rose if it was a girl, after Thomas's sister. Their son was born in October of 1867, red-faced and loud and perfect. They named him Samuel Thomas Jamison, and he had his father's dark hair and his mother's stubborn chin. Thomas cried when he held his son for the first time, and Lily understood. This was not just a baby. This was proof that they had survived, that they had built something lasting out of ashes and devastation. The farm prospered over the next few years. They added onto the house, built a chicken coop, planted an orchard of apple trees that would take years to bear fruit, but would be there for their grandchildren. Samuel grew into a wild, fearless boy who loved helping his father with the cattle and following his mother around the garden. When he was 3, they gave him a sister named Rose, and 2 years after that, a brother they named Matthew, after Lily's fallen brother. Thomas proved to be as good a father as he was a rancher. He taught his children to ride and shoot and work the land, but also to read and think and question. He told them stories of their grandparents and uncles, keeping the memories alive. He never spoke of his time in the war, but sometimes Lily would wake in the night to find him sitting by the window, staring out at the peaceful darkness, and she would go to him and hold him until the old ghosts released their grip. They grew old together on that land. Their children grew up and had children of their own, some staying to help work the farm and others heading off to seek their fortunes in California or back east. The barn Thomas built still stood strong, its wood weathered but solid. The orchard they planted together grew tall and produced apples so sweet they won prizes at the territorial fair. On their 30th anniversary, in the autumn of 1896, Thomas took Lily out to the spot where he had first seen the destroyed farm, where he had decided to stay and help a stubborn young woman rebuild her life. The land looked different now, green and prosperous, with fat cattle grazing and crops growing in neat rows. The house had been expanded twice and painted white, with a porch where they sat on summer evenings and watched the sun set over the mountains. "You ever regret it?" Lily asked, her hand in his. They were both gray now, their faces lined with age and sun, but when she looked at him, she still saw the young man who had offered to help a stranger for no reason but kindness. "Regret what? Staying?" Thomas shook his head. "Not for a single moment. This has been the best life I could have imagined. You gave me purpose, Lily. You gave me a reason to stop running and start living. You gave me the same thing." Lily leaned against his shoulder, still fitting perfectly after all these years. "When Morrison destroyed my farm, I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything. But really, I had just cleared ground for something better. We built this together, Thomas. Every beam of the barn, every fence post, every memory. We built it together. And it will last," Thomas said, looking out over the land they had fought so hard to keep. "Long after we are gone, this place will remember us. Our children will remember. That is all anyone can ask for, really, to be remembered, to have mattered." They sat together as the sun painted the sky red and gold, two people who had found each other in the worst of times and built a love strong enough to withstand anything. The farm around them was quiet except for the lowing of cattle and the distant laughter of grandchildren playing. It was peace, hard-won and lasting, and it was theirs. When Thomas died in 1903 at the age of 62, his heart simply giving out one morning while he was working in the barn he had built 40 years earlier, Lily grieved, but she did not break. She had their children and grandchildren around her, a whole network of love and support that she and Thomas had created together. She kept the farm running for another 10 years, stubborn and strong as ever, before finally agreeing to let her eldest son Samuel take over the daily operations. She lived until 1915, long enough to see the Wild West she had known fade into legend, long enough to see automobiles and telephones and the modern world emerging. But her favorite place was still that spot by the barn where Thomas had proposed, where they had stood together against Morrison and his men, where they had chosen to fight rather than run. Her grandchildren would find her there sometimes, sitting quietly with a faraway look in her eyes. When they asked what she was thinking about, she would smile and tell them stories. Stories about a young woman whose farm was destroyed and a cowboy who stopped to help and ended up staying forever. Stories about standing your ground and fighting for what matters. Stories about love that starts in the ashes and grows stronger than steel. And when Lily died peacefully in her sleep at 71 years old, they buried her next to Thomas on the hill overlooking the farm, under a stone that read, "Together in life, together in eternity." The barn still stood below, weathered but unbroken, a monument to what two people could build when they refused to give up. The farm stayed in the Jamison family for 3 more generations, and every child who grew up there learned the story of Lily Norton and Thomas Jamison, the woman who would not break and the cowboy who helped her rebuild. They learned that sometimes the worst moments in life clear the way for the best ones. They learned that love is not about grand gestures, but about showing up every day and doing the work. They learned that family is what you build, not just what you are born into. The barn finally came down in 1973, after more than a century of service. But before they demolished it, the family gathered for one last photograph in front of the structure, 4 generations standing where Lily and Thomas had once stood. And if you look closely at that photograph, you can almost see the ghosts of 2 people standing there with them, hands clasped, smiling at what they created together. That is what love is in the end. Not the fairy tale or the dramatic rescue, but the quiet choice to stay, to rebuild, to stand guard against the darkness and create something beautiful in its place. Lily and Thomas understood that, and they lived it every day of their lives together. Their story became legend in Fort Sumner, told and retold until no one could quite remember what was truth and what was embellishment. But the heart of it was always true. A woman who lost everything, a man who stopped to help, a love that grew from shared struggle into something unshakable. A life built together, beam by beam, day by day, until it became something that would last long after they were gone. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blows just right across the New Mexico prairie, they say you can still hear the sound of hammering from that hill, the echo of 2 people refusing to give up, building their future one nail at a time. That sound is the sound of hope, the sound of resilience, the sound of love that conquered everything the world threw at it and emerged victorious. That sound is the sound of Lily and Thomas, forever.